everyone. Welcome to another episode of Omni Athlete. If you're here, it's because you believe, like us, that sport is a vehicle for elevating global consciousness. But you know that elevating consciousness only matters if it actually helps you to achieve a peak performance state, get in the zone, and actually perform at your highest level. We created this show to highlight the world's highest achieving mind, body, and spirit competitors to show you the side of sports that is rarely talked about, if even understood. Okay, so today's guest is an intentional and aggressively knowledge-driven basketball coach turned founder and CEO of the company myPerforma, and on a mission to revolutionize the way coaches and players evaluate their performance from game to game. But the truth about our guest goes much deeper than disrupting the performance and coaching industry, which he intends to do. To truly understand what's motivated him to pour his heart and soul into this mission, you have to step into the shoes of a coach and former player who was frustrated, disappointed, and utterly baffled at the inability he had to help his players realize their best version of themselves on and off the court. The old saying that sports builds character has always resonated with him, but an inability to measure what it means to build that character and how it can impact performance for aspiring athletes was a problem he could not sit idly by and allow to occur. Starting with just an idea and literally a piece of paper, he shaped his vision of measuring what many thought to be immeasurable into a fully fledged application primed to add an untapped dimension to coaches who are truly focused on helping their athletes achieve peak performance. It's my pleasure to introduce to the show the CEO and founder of myPerforma, Justin Fleming. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Hey, Josh. Thanks for having me, man.
Of course, man. We were just talking off camera, and I think you and I share this belief. We've gotten a chance to know each other a little bit, and you and I share this belief that there's a change coming in the culture of sports, right? And I think that's a great place to start because as most coaches and athletes dive into your world, I think they're going to start by asking, well, what is that culture?
Yeah.
What is it now, and why does it need to change?
Absolutely. Well, I think there's this huge shift in mindset, and just becoming more aware of who you are from a mental perspective. A lot of times as coaches, we talk about the physical aspects of training and the reps that we either intend or that we aspire to put our players through in order to prepare them for competition. And up until now, it's been one of those things to where sort of the mental aspects of training has kind of been left by the wayside. I read some time ago in an article to where it said the mind was the last frontier that had yet to be addressed in terms of sports performance. And so that's kind of what led me on my journey to bring us to where Performa has brought us today. My journey started probably, I would say about 10 years ago. This is my 10th year of coaching now. I've been coaching basketball since 2008. And really early on, I really just latched on to these questions that my athletes were consistently asking me, or that I was consistently hearing them ask other coaches, which was, Coach, what do I need to work on? What things do I need to improve? And just after hearing that repetitiously from so many guys and gals, it was something that just over a time kind of progressed with me to where in 2014, when I was coaching at Heritage Christian Academy, I started what was called a performance Q&A assessment that really just allowed me to get perspective and feedback from my players to where it asked them a set of questions to where it said, did we win or did we lose? You'd be surprised how many times guys would tell me they won a game that they lost or would tell me that they lost a game that they won. Just, little things like that.
What do you mean by that? Because what I hear, right, as a coach, we can really easily get caught up with the surface reaction our players give us, right?
Yeah.
So we can, there's that unspoken feeling you have as a coach, right? When you've got, an athlete who comes up to you after a game, let's say you win, and their energy isn't as big or as high as it should be, right?
Yeah.
And you as a coach can feel that, and you know it, but you don't really know what they're thinking. So can you give us, some
Yeah.
examples? What were some of those keys you went, wow, this is totally not what I just witnessed out on the court?
Absolutely. I think any coach who's been coaching long enough can tell you there are games out there that you'll undoubtedly experience to where you could put up 100 points on the board and win that game, but the way that you won it is really not indicative of who you teach your team to be. And so there are some wins to where you can feel like you've lost, and there are undoubtedly some games that you lose to where you can come out feeling like, hey, I felt like we won this game in certain aspects, but we may not have won it on the scoreboard.
Yeah.
And so I know especially with respect to that, the current team that I'm coaching now, coaching basketball at Level in high school, assistant to varsity and head of JV, and our varsity squad has really, really been struggling this past year. And I know that the team that they are is not shown and illustrated through their record right now in terms of wins and losses. It's sort of been just one of those things all season to where we've been battling more so with the mental component of sports performance this year than anything else. You can do a lot with athletes on the surface level when it comes to their physical ability and their training, but one of the biggest things is that if your mindset does not align with your physical, nothing in the world that you do is really going to make a difference. And so that's where we feel Performa has really, really been helpful. Not just for me, just in terms of being a founder, but just being able to grab valuable insight and feedback from your players game to game is just such an invaluable resource, almost kind of like a commodity, if you will.
There's such a big push right now in, I think, performance in general, right? To be mindful, right? Mindful is this, like, mindfulness is everywhere, and it's not a cliche, but it gets probably overused and misinterpreted.
Yeah.
And we think of mindfulness sometimes as just this esoteric idea where it's really just awareness, right? Are you aware of what you're thinking, feeling, what you experienced? What, as a coach, how does getting your athletes to be more mindful empower them and empower you? And what do you feel like it allows them to do in their performance?
Right. Well, so in relation to Performa, kind of the way that the system works is after you get done with every game or competition, you're having your players fill out what we call KPIs, key performance indicators. And so with those key performance indicators, they're essentially rating or evaluating themselves with respect to 6 different core areas. What we like to call individual performance, team performance, both mental and physical psych factor ratings, and as well individual and team prep factor ratings. What that allows me to see as a coach is where is your head in relation to how you feel you performed. What I love telling coaches is that there's no right or wrong answer with a KPI, because a KPI is purely the perspective of their athlete to be able to communicate to coach, this is how I feel I played. One of my partners, George Hill, he loves kind of relating it to kind of like a grading system, to where after the game, all right, you grade yourself and tell me how you think you played. So that means if I grade myself an A and he thought that I played a C, well, now it's allowing us a chance to be able to go back and engage player to coach and be able to sit down and sort of wrap some context around, okay, here's what I think and here's what you think. Now let's constructively talk about, okay, where I think you can improve in some areas and why I disagree with how you graded yourself. So in the instance of many players, especially for what our job is really meant to do as coaches, we're really designed to be able to mold and shape, to guide and direct. So when I understand that a player has a improper view of themselves, whether it's inflated or it's deflated, it allows me to be able to really go back and to constructively engage with the player and tell them, all right, you thought your individual performance was a 3. I actually thought that you played a 6.
Yeah.
Here's why. The biggest thing about performance with athletes is their awareness of themselves. A lot of times you'll have athletes that are giving themselves ratings that, like I said, may be inflated or deflated. But me as their coach, seeing them consistently, not only in practice time, but as well in competition, like you're able to start to pick apart, their tendencies. And what the index allows us to do is to track that to where we now can sort of, based upon the trends that are communicated from the index, the Performa index, it allows us to be able to constructively wrap a game plan around their own individual training, but as well their training within the context of team.
So as a coach that's managing, at any given time, 20 to 30 personalities, right? Coaching is this inherently relationship-driven engagement, right? I mean,
absolutely.
We were just on a call the other day with another coach who was sharing the power that occurred in his career when he made the understanding, kind of the jump to say, wow, I have to care more about the relationships, right? I've got to invest time here.
Right.
What strikes me as so interesting is that most coaches in a team sport where inherently you're trying to get a group of people to move together, right? You've got 10, 15, 20 different personalities you're trying to get to move in the same direction. We sometimes treat it as if they all need the same thing,
right?
But they're human beings, and no human being needs the same thing, right?
Absolutely. So, what we coin Performa as is Performa is a game-to-game performance review tool used to facilitate feedback and communication between athletes and coaches. And so what that is allowing us to really do is to be able to understand player to player, person to person, how are they thinking and feeling about themselves on a consistent basis throughout the season. And I'm glad you mentioned it. Coaching is really just synonymous with relationships. The better you become at building relationships with your players, with your team overall, the more inclined that they are to literally plow through walls for you. And so ultimately, with respect to coaching, you raise a great point. I love giving the analogy, athletes and coaches are like teachers and students. But what the unique difference is between the two is that with athletes and coaches, there has never been, up until now, a way to sort of consistently grade an athlete game to game. Because with teachers and students, you've got classroom time, you've got lecture, you've got graded tests and quizzes, but the key word being there, graded. And so with sports, for us, the gym, the field, the pool, the turf, wherever it is that you coach, that's our classroom. The practice time is lecture. The game, the competition is the test. But and it still baffles me up to this point why there has never been anything even similar or close to Performa that allows you to be able to really understand the grade of a player. But what we're doing is we're inverting it, that current model essentially, and flipping it on its head. And we're allowing the athletes to grade themselves because, I'll be honest, there's a little bit a mix of objectivity and subjectivity with relation to sports. Because, again, based upon the level of confidence and awareness that a particular athlete has, that plays a lot into their overall growth and development. And so when we talk about the idea of having an athlete actually grade themselves, give it to essentially the teacher, which is the coach in this instance, and then the teacher being able to essentially grade that grade. I love coining the phrase comparing expectations versus outcome, because on a team as a coach, I'm the leader of that team. So obviously I have expectations, but there's only one outcome. You're winning or you're losing. And at the same time, you've got to manage however many expectations are that sits on that team and line it up with yours. So if there's no alignment in terms of expectation, standard, and priority, player to coach, but especially in my case with having 11 or 12 guys on a team, if I have no way of being able to check the alignment, player to me, with everyone on my team, if you kind of envision a diagram, you put me in the middle and then all 11 or 12 guys around me, I'm the central focal point of each of those guys. So if I don't have a way to be able to measure the outcome between each guy, each person on my team, and consistently measure the outcome and the expectation, then as coaches, I kind of ask myself, what are we really doing to make sure that we're not only holding each individual player accountable, but as well holding the team accountable?
We have this, one of the pillars, right, of being an Omni Athlete or an Omni Coach is understanding that reality is inherently subjective, right? There is a limit to what is truly objective in the world that we live in, right? So much of it is how we are choosing to see it. And as an athlete, performance can be this crippling moment where we are, we can, if you're good, you don't play great and you get upset. If you're great and you don't play better than you've ever played, you're going to doubt whether you really performed at your peak. And it's a beautiful dynamic because it can push us. But there's a challenge, I imagine, as a coach when you sit there and recognize, okay, here's a kid who dropped 25 points today, right? He had a great game. Our team won. He's feeling like he played at a 2 or a 3. He feels like he wasn't making good decisions, X, Y, Z. Yet you're seeing it as a coach sitting there going, look, that's not what happened. And the responsibility you have as a coach to help shape that reality, because if it doesn't get in alignment, suddenly you've got a player potentially who's going to go through life with a worldview that may not help him actually do what he wants to do, right? Achieve what he wants to achieve. Right.
It's sort of that story that leads to, what's the lens that you're framing it through. Anyone that's of age and, that has had a drink or two. And that whole idea of beer goggles. How are you looking at things and what's your perception of it? And that's the unique thing about people, right? We've all got different perspectives. We all, frame things through, I guess, either the perspective that we have that has grown due to the environment that we've grown up in, or it's as a result of our own individual experience with learning and our own beliefs and value systems. There's a book out called Mindset by really, really world-renowned psychologist Carol Dweck. And so the concept of having a growth mindset, which essentially states that, you are born with obviously a certain set of skills, talents, and abilities, and there's a belief within the growth mindset that if you don't have a certain something, it does not mean that you can't develop that something to grow into other areas of life or to become better in certain areas of life that you already currently maintain.
This is incredible, because I think what maybe happens a lot of times is we see somebody who's a hard worker,
Mhm.
maybe a top performer, and we immediately believe that they must be a learner, right? They
Right.
must have a growth mindset. They must be, excuse me, they must be trying to push themselves to this insane level
Right.
through that lens, because how would they get there if they hadn't?
Mhm.
And I think what you've, I'm sure, seen and what we're learning is that in fact many of the world's peak performers, because of the ecosystem that sports creates, right? A
Right.
lot of times unintentionally, the energy, the culture that we are creating inside locker rooms, inside through media narrative, through these different pieces,
Mhm.
that the kids that are performing the best
Mhm.
are sometimes the ones with the most fixed mindset, right?
Right. Right. That's kind of a place that I really have to remind myself as a coach. Um, I speak from basketball because that's what I know the most. Um, I'll be honest. Growing up as an athlete, as a youngster, I was not the most athletically inclined. Wasn't the most talented. Um, I always picked up things really, really easily. Whether it was riding a bike, whether it was snowboarding, whether it was catching a ball or shooting one, and really growing up, for me, my parents really they sat back and they let me really choose my own path.
Hmm.
They weren't those parents that either forced or pushed their child or children into sports, and they really allowed my sister and myself and my brother the opportunity to sort of pick and choose what it was that we wanted to do. And I'm really, really thankful for that, because for me now, my passion and my love for the game of basketball, but as well for sports, has really grown. Um, I would say as of the past 12 years, when I started diving heavily into coaching. And for me, it was really a thing to where having the context of how I was coached as a kid, and what we call the old school way of coaching,
Yeah.
and coaching the generation that I do now, there's a vast difference. Because back then it was you're at the mercy and subject to whatever coach says was it, and there was no way around it. Period. End of story. And if you weren't performing at a level that they needed you to perform, like, you were there on the bench beside him or her, and like until you got it up, that was where you were going to be. Period. There was no like talk around playing time and equal playing time and making sure that everyone is everyone's feelings essentially were attended to. But now as I look back on that, I kind of wonder what it would look like for me as an athlete had I had use of something like Performa then, to where my coaches were actually able to hear from me.
What would have changed? What would have been different?
To be honest, I probably would have gone a lot further and a lot deeper in sports from a player standpoint, just because I would have had some more context around really working to develop my own personal self. My hunger and my drive for greatness really came in my later years as a young adult, and really it wasn't there as tightly as it was.
So it wasn't. And tell me if this is what you're saying. Is what I hear, and what's super interesting is that wasn't something naturally cultivated by sport.
Correct. One of the biggest things that I look at when I look back on growing up, especially within sports, I had people that I looked at in particular that were, I guess, people of admiration, people that I said I admire those qualities in that person. And, even still knowing those people today, Clinton Crouch, he was a basketball player at the small Christian school that I attended back east. And I always looked at Clint. I never had an older brother. I had an older sister. But I was like, gosh, I want to be like Clint, And, Anthony Miller, rest his soul, Michael Miller, his brother, the Fred Howes. These were guys that I looked up to that were older than me, that were really great in sports, and that it was sort of a thing that I was really looking at them and looking at qualities that I really admired and saying, like, those are things that I want to put in my arsenal and work to become better at. Now, with respect to sports, it's kind of interesting because for me, there was kind of like this battle that I was always kind of conflicted with. Very, very early on, I had that entrepreneurial spirit, and if I didn't have a leaf raking company during the season, it was a grass cutting company. Yeah. And if it wasn't the grass cutting company, it was the car wash company. Yeah. And so I always had this drive internally to, from a business standpoint, but it was never really truly there with sports. And where I really found my drive and my passion with sports was when I found coaching. And so when I started coaching, it was like a switch got flipped because there was something about this process, just being process driven, about taking this raw, unrefined group of guys through the duration of a season, and at the end of the season, like, seeing what they could become. And the further and further along I get in my coaching career, that only sharpens more so inside of me. My players make me better, not only as a coach, but as well as just a person, a businessman. I really relate business to sports because it's this whole concept of taking a team and putting everybody together cohesively for a common goal, and achieving success through that. And really, what happened for me in business at a later stage, I really think was sort of the I guess the result of what started in sports but never really materialized. And so when I look at who I am as a businessman today, for me, gosh, I shiver to think the type of athlete that I would honestly be today had I had something that was really able to really sort of guide and train me better. Just being able for me to communicate in a better fashion with my coach.
So I think what's really striking, sport is this magnificent arena, right? Mm-hmm. It's this place where we are able to dive into the true depths of the human experience, and it's not just waxing poetic, it's real, right? We experience a level of feeling in our body, in our minds, in our hearts that's different than anywhere else. Yeah. But what happens a lot of times is it seems like we take for granted, and what my experience has been, and it sounds like yours too, is we take for granted the fact that, especially as coaches, that sport, even though it may inherently be that, right, that if we don't take the time to help each individual athlete take a step forward in their own world, whatever that looks like, right? Sport can only, in an objective sense, go so far, right? There's this, responsibility, I guess, that that we need to understand the individual person. And Pete Carroll talks about this all the time, right?
Yeah.
That there's and Steve Kerr's is another one where it's about the individual, right? It's about the person, not just the player, not just Justin as a player, but Justin as a person. What's in his world? What does he think about? How does he think about it? What does he feel when he makes a shot, misses a shot? And what it sounds like you're alluding to, and what's energizing for me to hear is that it's that there's something we can do to help players individually take a step forward, even in a team sport.
Right. Touching back on that point I mentioned earlier about awareness, I think ultimately, just in life, when you know who you are to your core, that's where the beauty of everything great happens and begins for you. And something that I tell my players all the time, I'm here for you, not just in a sports sense or on the hardwood, but as well like anything in life that you need. Like, don't ever hesitate to give me a call, shoot me a text if there's ever anything that you need, whether it's coming to pick you up from a party that you don't want your parents to know about, or someone's not able to drive, sort of a thing, or if it's a family issue and you need to get away and you want some time to decompress and just vent. Like, I'm here, and I grew up in a private Christian school environment, and as bad as it sounds, I think oftentimes in those environments a lot of things can be swept under the rug. And so growing up as a private school, private Christian school kid, it was one of those things to where, with respect to just life in general, you were expected to be and live and do and act a certain way, and I joke about it all the time, as crazy and as bad as it sounds, sometimes those kids in those environments are the ones that are the most messed up, just because they're trying to be and act a certain way for mommy and daddy, or in the school for their teachers. But then it's a certain thing to where they get out in the real world and life smacks you, because you can no longer hide and you have to address things head on.
So emotions are something we talk about all the time, and we're seeing research come out now, right, that shows, I think, what a lot of athletes have known intuitively, and just people that know their body, the emotions that we feel when we get angry, sad, hateful, scared, nervous, energized, those have physiological effects, right? My body on a cellular level responds a different way when I'm excited, when I'm confident, than it does if I'm nervous or scared or angry, right?
It does.
And as high school and college athletes, right, these are the times in the life of these individuals that are maybe the most impactful in having to process raw emotion at a really deep level, right? You're experiencing all of these emotions between the ages of 11 to 22, 23, 24.
Right.
You're angry, you're sad, you're scared, you're nervous, but you don't necessarily know what to do with it. And as athletes, like, that trauma gets stored, right? If we're not given a way to say, I felt this after this happened. We did this today in our game. Coach said this, and I felt this. I played like this, and I felt that way. And without an outlet for it, it's not hard to see why sometimes these kids don't know what to do when sport leaves.
Right. It's so funny because, in coaching high school sports, and having coached as well middle school aged athletes from about 4th or 5th grade to 7th and 8th, you can see the compare and contrast of where kids kind of lie in the spectrum in terms of life and growth stages. And it's really funny too. There's this on the measurement scale that we have for the KPIs, with the ratings that we have, we measure things on a scale of 7, and I know in reading this someplace, There are life cycles, and just with respect to kids in general. I think as coaches, we're really designed to help nurture kids with respect to sports differently in certain stages. But as well in life, when you talk about the relation of sports to life, and really helping kids to see the correlation of what it means to grow through certain things. Sports is a great example of that. So, for instance, when you're talking about kids who play sports as young as 2 or 3 years old, from that age all the way up to, I would say, around 8 or 9, that's where you're purely developing not only the fundamental, but really just the love of playing and being active and interacting with other kids. When you're talking about the stage of about 9 to kind of 12-ish, 13, there's a huge emphasis around fundamental development and really teaching a kid what's required to be successful at the next level. So here's the interesting thing about me. When I was around that 8 or 9 stage, like I mentioned, for me as an athlete, whether it was riding a bike or snowboarding or throwing a ball or swinging a bat, like I felt like things came natural. However, from a coaching standpoint, there was really never truly any skill development, what we call the fundamental development of games and sports. And so that's where I think I faltered, or had my parents been those parents to be like, all right, let's get you a trainer and, let's make sure that we're doing this every day or whatever. My parents never really harping on that for me. But I say that just with respect and relation to, development of athletes. If you really miss that developmental stage of right around 9 to 13, when you get to the high school level, is one of those things to where if you haven't learned it before then, not to say that you can't learn it, because again, the growth mindset, it states like you can learn it and grow it and develop it. However, you're so far behind the curve that it's very tough for you to match and get up there unless you're gifted or talented or really athletic and can make up sort of that curve, that learning curve. And so that's why, even today, in coaching high school sports, not only the teams that I coach, but as well, being able to watch other athletes, whether or not I've coached them in club, or I just have the opportunity to see them play in other arenas and other environments. You have a really good bearing and a knowledge on, okay, obviously that kid didn't play and wasn't really working out in that developmental stage. You know what I mean? Because now when I have players in high school that, gosh, making a layup or the sound dribbling, solid dribbling isn't there, or your shooting form and your technique isn't there. Like that's what lends to the further development of your IQ. And so once you move past that fundamental stage of 9 to 13. Well, now it's about performance. From about 14 to 18, like we're teaching you, not only is it my job to continue nurturing your love of the game and your passion and making sure that you're having fun with it, but now like this is where we're preparing you for the world. Because high school, like once you graduate at 18 or whenever you graduate, like life starts for you. And unfortunately for some kids that are in high school, life has already started for them. Those kids that are in those, lower income harsher economical, situations and environments, it's sort of one of those things to where, gosh, you see the harsh realities of life. And sometimes you've got players to where you say they need the sport more than the sport needs them. Mm-hmm. And so, at high school, not only am I teaching you to perform and what it truly means like to win, but as well I have to do a decent job of balancing. It's not just about the wins and losses, because some coaches get so wrapped up in their win and loss record. And granted, like, I want to win. I want to win championships. Like, if I'm not put in a position to where I can take your kid and show him the greatest thing that he can achieve in the sport, then I think, why am I doing it? And as well, if it's not about winning and losing, then why do we have a scoreboard?
Yeah.
Go play rec ball someplace. There's a fine line of balance there, though. And so my job at the high school level as a coach is continue to nurture the passion, as well continuing with your skill development, but as well now it's about process through performance. Because the next level after that, if you're one that seeks to go and play at the collegiate level, then now you're talking about production. Because as a college coach, as a college athlete, if you're not producing, you will not see playing time. There's no such thing as equal this or equal that. Like, you're either producing or you're not, because they're paying you money at that point in time.
It's what is so striking to me. There's so much I want to unpack right there, and the thing that I want to go back to something you said a moment ago, performance, right? So you're coaching kids how to perform, right? And that is the beauty of sport and competition, is it forces us to step out there and perform, right? Like there's an outcome we are, maybe whether we should be or not, we're focused on, we see, and there is an environment that adds stress, tension, right?
Right.
Pressure, and we want to deliver. What I think is so interesting that gets confused sometimes, I think, is that life is performance.
Yeah.
Right?
It really is.
Right? So we're
really
when we're coaching kids on how to perform, if we don't give them every tool that we possibly can to not just perform physically, but to perform mentally and emotionally and spiritually and relationally and with everything that it means to be a human being and perform. Like, peak performance isn't just, hey, let me go score 100 points. Peak performance is, how do I perform with everything at the best it can be? And it's striking and energizing to hear that.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
it really is. And I think that's one of the striking things I'll say about Performa is that with perspective leads to intent. Because it really kind of shows, like we mentioned earlier, the lens that you're framing things through. And when you understand the lens, and you understand kind of the place that things are coming from, you have more of a foundation to be able to engage in a way that's not only going to be constructive to the environment and the process that you're going through there, but as well you're helping now a player to become more aware and relate and experience to the overall context of who they are. Because again, your athletic talents and your capabilities, they're a feature of who you are. They're not who you are. And that's why a lot of athletes, unfortunately, have such a huge struggle making a transition out of sports into whatever other area of life that they decide to go into. Whether it's a high school athlete that was the star athlete that maybe ends up getting injured his or her senior year, and unfortunately that kind of curbs the being able to matriculate and go on to play at the next level. Or whether it's a collegiate athlete that didn't get drafted or doesn't go professional, and now they've got to figure out, well, shoot, I've been this athlete for the better half of my life, and now I've got to go and figure out doing something else when I grew up being the star and the man on campus or the woman on campus, and now I'm going into the world with the workforce and I just become another number. Or whether it be a professional athlete that has had either a long-standing career and now they're making a transition into something new. Or, having that long-standing career and having a devastating injury and having to go and find something new. Like, the biggest thing that my desire for a lot of athletes and as well coaches to be able to help out with this is that athletes are able to better understand what are those qualities that are unique to me. What's my chemistry? What's my makeup that's going to best serve me in life, period? Because we always say, like, we want sports to be a tool that's able to really shine a light for athletes on, not just the physical aspects of performance and of games, but as well we want you to be able to relate it to life lessons. What does it mean to play nice with the other boys and girls, being a team, and teamwork? What does it mean to push through adversity? What does it mean to give it your all in terms of hustle and aggressiveness and effort and intensity? What does it mean to communicate? What does it mean to, sort of be a cheerleader and have some team spirit and morale? What does it mean to, those qualities, those traits that make up undoubtedly who athletes are at their core? Those things that you need to have in-game, in competition when you play sports. And obviously the skills that differ sport to sport. There are some things that I do in one sport that may be helpful or make me a really, really great athlete in another. There's never really been any correlation for athletes with respect to who am I? What's my makeup? What are the things that are my strengths and what are the things that are my weaknesses? There are tons of, I won't say tons, but there's very well-known personality tests and assessments out there. And really what those things seek to do is to provide context for people, to show you, who you are as a person. And, based on these qualities and these things that you embody, you would be best here. And I think for sports, especially with respect to coaches and athletes, there are just natural things about us as people, as human beings, to where if we understood really just the depth of who we were, then we would be able to have better outcomes with respect to our overall performance, whether it be on sports teams and in games and things like that, but as well just with respect to life in general. Like, if I automatically know, like, I'm a really, really great communicator, and I at the same time I'm one that likes to provide a lot of energy, and I like galvanizing people. Well, that in and of itself, if you're a great communicator and you bring so much energy to a team and you know how to galvanize people, well, that's telling me, like, you've got some leadership qualities about you that's going to serve you well in other places, wherever it is that you decide that you want to go. So honestly, it's just a thing to where with the Performa Index, we're really making an effort to be able to provide context around performance and to shed more light on the person that tends to get lost at times in the big picture, because again, even with respect to myself, like very warranted, I would say that I was probably one of those kids that got lost in the sauce because I didn't know how to, as a young kid, like you don't know how to do that unless someone's leading and guiding you. And unfortunately, if a coach is not one that's willing to either has the intuition to see past the surface, and to say like, okay, I see the potential of this particular person, and really help them to sift through all of that stuff so that they can become acquainted with their own greatness sooner rather than later. Like I said, I shiver to think the type of athlete that I would have been. I'm a better athlete today just simply because of the people that I've watched up to now. I consider myself a student of the game, especially with basketball, but now with all sports that I have to be a part of. But it's just when you can become acquainted with who you are sooner rather than later, it's only going to lend to better results in the future.
It's absolutely incredible. Before I ask my last question, where can these guys go if they want to connect with you online?
Absolutely. So obviously, myPerforma.com. You can access the website there and find out just a whole host of information in terms of the index itself and what we measure and how we measure. If people want to connect with us via Twitter, at myPerforma for Twitter, and as well you can connect with me on Twitter. It's at It's Just Justo on Twitter, and I'm trying to think what other social media avenues do I have, and as well my email. You can reach me, Justin at myperforma.com.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so final question. What does it mean to be an Omni Athlete?
Gosh, well, when I think about Omni, just that word in and of itself, Omni lends to, when I look at the origin of that, Omni is all-knowing. So not to say that Omni athletes know it all, but when I think Omni athlete, it just means to me that athletes know more. Omni athletes know more about themselves than other athletes do.
It's incredible. Justin, thanks for being on the show, man. This was fantastic.
Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate you inviting me down.
Yeah, man. Wow. So, guys, as you take a moment to go into Justin's world and what he and his team are doing at Performa, just recognize that the theme is so much about self-awareness, like the power. You can hear it in his voice, and you'll see it the moment you dive into their index and their application. Like the power you can generate as an athlete or as a coach in understanding the awareness and what your strengths are, where you need to improve, to be able to manage that and track it from game to game. Like that has the potential to be a game changer, and more importantly, the energy that he's bringing to it is much more than just let me build an application. It's about influencing and impacting culture on a much deeper level within the sports community, and finding those athletes who, without something like Performa, whatever the tool is, wouldn't be able to reach their peak performance and achieve what they're capable of achieving. So you're going to see that. I highly recommend it, guys. Go check them out, see what they're doing, and until next time.